2, 3, and 4 are in the feeling triad, what we call the feeling triad. 2s feel the emotions of others to a vast extent. Like they're so sensitive to the emotions of others. 4s, on the other hand, are just as sensitive, but to themselves. And they live and swim in their own emotions and can do so for a long time.
This season on the Living Out Love podcast, we are focusing on you, who you are, what motivates you, what you're here to contribute, and how you can expand. We'll be utilizing my leadership skills and spiritual connection, diving deep into the Enneagram and astrology. Listen every week to become intimately aware of yourself. Only then can you heal and grow. Let's get to work, loves. Hello, loves. Welcome back to our Enneagram series on the podcast. Today we're talking about 4s. And I have to say, the 4s that I know, I love and I admire, but I don't know that many 4s. So my first question to you guys is are 4s rare or is that just me?
Yes, 4s, I was doing some research and they're the most rare Enneagram type. I don't know what reason it is, but they seem to be least numbers.
Fascinating. Well, Dad, why don't you kick us off? Who is a 4? Who or
Okay,
what?
famous Enneagram types. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter fan. Johnny Depp, Pirates of the Caribbean. And then John Steinbeck, great writer from the 50s. Bob Dylan. Well, our audience is young enough or old enough to know who Bob Dylan is. He's a great singer-songwriter. Leonard Cohen, the Hallelujah guy. Hallelujah. Alanis Morissette. Now, she may be young enough that our crowd knows who Alanis Morissette is.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then the artist known as Prince is 4. Okay, more probably recognizable, Benedict Cumberbatch. Sherlock Holmes, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah.
Helena Bonham Carter.
Oh, wow. So quite the theme here.
Yeah. And then one more, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, Ewan McGregor. Obi-Wan Kenobi was a 4 according to Star Wars.
Wow. Well, so I'd say the theme of artists and actors are known for being emotional. So emotionally sensitive.
And very creative. I mean, J.K. Rowling said the Harry Potter book came to her in a kind of a flash. Just that intense creative. Johnny Depp has a big range of characters that he can play. Same thing with Benedict Cumberbatch. These are some very, very talented people.
I think it's Cumberbatch.
Cumberbatch. Okay. Sorry, Benedict. I've been fixed.
So talented, creative, sensitive. Is that where we're headed with the 4?
Well, intense.
Okay.
Can be self-absorbed. And not aware that other people don't experience the same emotions they have.
Oh.
Sometimes 4s can run in a small circle of friends because their emotional display, it's just too much for some of the other numbers who don't deal with their emotions a lot. Like, oh man, this is too much. I can't. So things like that. They are known for wanting to be unique and authentic. So if you see a person out there who's dressed to a higher standard, a little different from someone else, acting a little bit different, that is part of the way they express their authenticity. So I really enjoy 4s. I have a handful of them, and they're all very different. The subtypes, the difference between the subtypes is, I think, more different than other numbers that, in my opinion, Stephanie probably would say something different.
I think that's an interesting insight. And the 4s that I do know, I like their style. It's like, it's not my style, but they have their own style that's unique to them. And it's not like accidental.
No.
Okay, so
not.
Here's a 4 you'll know. Mary Harlan was a 4.
Yes.
And she told me once that she never shopped in a department store because it was
Oh.
too pedestrian. Like,
Pedestrian.
yeah, pedestrian. Like there would
Yeah.
be, you know, like any common person could shop in a department store. You had to shop in unique specialty boutique places that would give that you would not, you know, buy a regular old Jones New York suit. You had to buy something different. So,
So the
If I didn't know Mary Harlan, I would have said that's pretty snooty.
right.
But I
And
didn't experience her as snooty.
no, it was just how she
Yeah,
expressed
that
herself.
stuff.
It was just the thing,
Yeah.
you know. And so it doesn't matter that, you know, it could be anything, but they're going to seek out unique places. They're going to seek out unique expressions. They're going to, you know, even if they're putting on a pair of Levi's, they're going to put on a pair of Levi's with some different shirt, or their jewelry is going to be, you know, like they're going to really put themselves together in a way that expresses their uniqueness.
Yeah. Dad, what were you going to say? You were going to jump in?
Well, the country of France is viewed on the Enneagram as being a country of 4. And they won't holiday anywhere that's pedestrian. Not going to come to America or, you know.
You don't see French
So-
people going to Disney World.
Yes.
Got it. Oh, that's fantastic.
In fact, they prefer, if they're going to holiday outside of France, to go to an island that is either still a colony of France or was once owned by French, because that would set they would, you know, they'll experience that uniqueness.
Okay, they like to stay within the unique realm. So it's not
Yeah.
about like French
Well,
pride. It's
about
just about like that culture.
being snobby or I'm better than you. It's just they just don't enjoy the pedestrian. They enjoy experiencing something that's authentic and unique.
Mm. Well, that would explain why everybody has their own winery instead of having mass corporate. You know, when I went to France in college, it was like so many people just they make their own wine and it's their land and it's their, you know, versus we have the mass and we can all buy the same things and we bond over the same things,
Right.
culturally speaking. Oh, that's fascinating. And it's occurring to me that if anybody is listening to this podcast for the first time, I haven't introduced you all. So podcast listeners, we're talking with my mom and dad, Dana and Stephanie Foy. They're both certified integrative Enneagram practitioners, and you can learn more about them at the links in the show notes, but we'll keep going. It just occurred to me I hadn't done that. I'm clearly not a 1. So back to the 4s. What is it? So they're sensitive, they're emotional people, and I'm assuming their goal is to be authentic and unique. That's what they're solving for.
Right. And so let me say this about the 4s. Okay, so think about 2, 3, and 4 are in the feeling triad, what we call the feeling triad. 2s feel the emotions of others to a vast extent. Like they're so sensitive to the emotions of others. 4s, on the other hand, are just as sensitive, but to themselves. And they live and swim in their own emotions and can do so for a long time. So hence, you know, creative types like singer-songwriters and actors, because those emotions come so present for them, unlike most everybody else on the Enneagram. I mean, there is no other number, in my opinion, that has the emotional range and can sit in them with comfort. And like the negative emotions, like a 7 is going to reframe it. You know, I heard one time that in the Jewish tradition, there's something called sitting Shiva. So when somebody passes, you just go to the home and you just sit with the person. You're just there. You're just present. And that 4 is the best person to sit Shiva because they can just be present to grief with they can just be in the grief and it's no big deal. And they like, you know, it's like, I say, it's like swimming in the deep end of the emotions. They're in it and they don't care. They're just swimming, you know, and they can just be there with it. So
I mean, that can be such a beautiful gift. I
Yeah,
mean, wallowing is not great, but especially for those of us, from an emotional intelligence perspective, emotions are energy and they can get trapped in the body. And so if you need to experience grief, but you're not practiced experiencing emotion, having a four around is probably really handy.
exactly.
It's probably
But
annoying if you don't want to experience emotion.
but the downside, the negative side of four,
Mhm.
or the growth area for four, if you're the unredeemed four, is to learn to get out of their emotions, to learn to move through them, as opposed to the emotions having them. They don't
Yeah.
have emotions, the emotions have them. I mean, in lots of fours that you talk to, it's like, oh yeah, they just feel like they're taken over, like their whole body is taken over by an emotion, by a feeling, and figuring out how to get out of that is a big deal for fours. So moving into that thinking quadrant and into action is can be a real challenge for them, because it's like they've got to get themselves out of it some way or another.
Yeah. Well, I can strongly relate to feeling overtaken. So if I feel that, I can't even imagine what it's like for a four.
Right.
So I'm a two and I'm in the feeling triad, and I'm a feeler doer and thinking is repressed. So with fours, is the thinking the repressed or is it the doing that's repressed?
Uh, Let me think about that. I Typically it's the doing that's repressed. So
Okay.
feeling, thinking, and then action is the low end.
Mm,
So different than the twos, because y'all feel and do, feel and do, feel and do, and later on think about it. So fours, feel and think, feel and think, feel and think. Because you think about fours, they also are buddied up right next to fives, and fives are thinking,
or
thinking, thinking,
thinking.
thinking. So
Yeah.
it's
But
sort
they're
of,
also buddied up next to threes, which are doing, 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 doing.
yeah, but yeah. So,
So that actually leads me to a question, because one of the fours in my life that I just adore and admire is actually a big doer.
right.
And so if a four is a big action taker, I guess there's no one answer to this, but in my mind, I'm like, okay, is that because she's an unhealthy four and isn't actually allowing for the emotional experience? Or is it because she's learned how to do the emotions and learned how to use them to propel her? Like
Well, we would
if
hope
they're,
it's the second, but we don't know.
but it could
I
go
mean,
either.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. Because there's some numbers where when we talk about them and the people in my life that's what they are, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it, I get it, I get it. But the fours is the first number we've come across where I know people for sure that are fours. But I think to Dad's point, perhaps the subtypes has the most variety because it doesn't quite. It's confusing a little bit. Like I'm like, go ahead.
I think it's just because we don't know enough fours. Truthfully,
Oh
I don't
yeah,
think they're any more complex or different than the rest of the numbers. It's just that we have more exposure and experience with the different types and the different subtypes than we do with fours. They're more unique. They're like little rare birds. So you don't get to know them as well. That's the other thing, is because they're all internally referenced and they're going to show you what they want you to see, not what's necessarily, whatever. Um,
yeah.
so
I have a hard time with that. Like people showing you what they want you to see. And I know we all do that in different ways to different extents. Um, but I think, especially with the four, because they're curated by nature
right.
with their appearance and stuff, it feels to me like it's even more curated with them based on my limited exposure.
Well, think about one of the things that we can think about fours is that they want to go to depth. They want to feel their feelings at depth. They want to be deep. They want to be deep thinkers. They want to be deep feelers. And so, if they have the perception that that's not safe or that's not, in an environment, then they're going to
Mm.
because again, their gifts are identity, depth, and originality. So they're going to present that as their face. So, but their vice is envy, and that they think often that other people have something they don't have. They always think somebody else has something, and they are dissatisfied with ordinary life. Ordinary reality seems always dissatisfying to them. So they're always seeking for something better, something more unique, something, so.
Envy. That's interesting.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me that on the Enneagram, the color is green for fours. They're green with envy.
Well, the vulnerability where they feel like they're exposed, they're uncomfortable, and people are looking at them is when they're being ordinary.
Mm.
And their social style, they don't get what they want, they tend to withdraw and go deep within and think and mull things over and feel the emotions and try to work through it quietly. And then their conflict style, when things don't go their way, they can be very reactive. They can be very loud, emotional, in order to be heard and let people know that they need to be heard and things aren't necessarily going the way they like them.
Mm. I'm just sitting. So as a 2, I'm like, I'm having feelings, but my thoughts are not clear yet. So I'm sitting. Okay. I have a question about it, but I'm not sure what my question is yet. I think so. With they go into the feelings. What it wasn't the conflict. What was the one you said before that? Their social style.
Yeah, when the social style. If they don't get what they want, they have a tendency to withdraw and get quiet and think about it, experience the emotion of it, and be with the emotion of it until they work through it. They don't get it. Now, when they get into a conflict, they can be very reactive, emotional, loud, and just with an attempt to be seen and heard. Like, this is not right. I think this should be different. I mean, and there are a lot of people that do that aren't fours, but this is typically, and there are a lot of the range of fours, the low side and the high side of fours. I was at a class and 2 fours were sitting side by side. One was a self-pressed 4, and the other, I think, is an SO4. And both of them were the same, but very different. Both of them were uniquely dressed. Both of them were very polished, but one was quiet and the other was more the reactive point. So the self-pressed person, I wasn't quite sure she was a 4 until I found out. And she absolutely identified with me. She liked it. She likes being unique and works hard at trying to make sure she's expressing her authentic self. And the other was a little more emotional and easier for me to identify them as to what I think is a 4 because of the the demonstrative behavior she exhibits. And I got to tell you, I sing in a church choir, and there is this lovely 4 that stands out in the audience. I look for. She's always uniquely dressed, put together very well. I mean, always a notch above everybody around her. And when she sways with the music, it's more of a dancing. It's appropriate, but it's more of a dancing style.
More
she
expressive.
Started out, may have even expressive, may have even practiced a little bit. And it inspires guys like me who are kind of shy and want to be seen but not be seen. Well, look at her; that looks great. I could do some of that. So they inspire people, and they're not even aware of it.
Well, I finally formulated a thought from what we said earlier.
Okay.
So you were talking with social styles, how they'll withdraw and feel their feelings. I was thinking about, sometimes I refer to like our baby selves, our purest self that hasn't matured yet. And I was thinking about like the baby 4s who the world doesn't go the way they want it to. They withdraw and they feel whatever it is they're feeling, whether it's disappointment or rage or, whatever it is. and how when the emotions have you, you don't get through that. And so that typically ends up being self-defeating. Like they're probably not ever getting what they want because they're in the disappointment. And if you're an emotional person that likes to feel emotion, it feels better to just feel a strong emotion of disappointment than it does to try to feel less intensely through an emotion like curiosity or, something up higher on the emotional scale. So literally, I could see a 4 that doesn't know they're a 4, that doesn't realize that their emotions have them stuck, kind of never getting what they want because physiologically it honestly kind of feels good to feel upset because at least it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
It's counterintuitive, but so I bet it takes some work to really to want to push through and get what you want, or to push through to get through conflict when some of those feelings aren't as intense. If everything's just
Well,
okay, it's almost better to feel bad than it is to just feel okay, because at
Well,
least that's an
yeah, because
intensity.
it is. And feeling okay is ordinary. Remember what, they don't
Oh,
like to be
yes, the tortured
ordinary.
artist.
So that's like they've either got to be, some of the downside of 4 is they don't mind their suffering, and they can outsuffer others. Like you get 2 4s in a room, and they're like, they go to like who has it the worst. They could go that
Yeah.
direction. So suffering and pain is a badge of honor for 4s. Whereas a 3 or a 7, they'd be like, oh heck no. But for them, they're in it, yes. And so, because why
Yeah.
would you get out of that being unique to just be ordinary?
yeah, and then when
So,
they go off, I'm gonna say go off with this a massive emotional reaction. They don't understand that that's not normal for other people. They don't understand how
Mm.
hard it lands on others, and how it could just make people say, I just don't need this much person. I'm
Yeah.
around them. It's just too much for me. People make, I think, an unconscious decision just to move on. Uh, they just can't. I'm not up for that. If you're a 3 or a 7, I'm going on. If you're a 9, you go, man, this hurts. I
Yeah.
want to avoid this. Uh, if you're a 1, well, that's not how you do this. I mean, act like that. That's not the right thing to
Yeah.
do. And the 8, well, get control of yourself. You know,
Yeah.
do this, do this. So it's that emotional outburst that I see some people who I think are 4s that do that have no idea that they have this push pull with people. They want to pull people in so that they can be unique and have these great friends. But then when they don't get what they want, boom, they have a big emotional reaction and they push people away. So there's this push pull with 4s that I don't think they understand. In fact, I don't know what they think about it, but that's how I see
Yeah.
them and how I experience.
Well, I'm going to do a plug here for anybody that knows a 4. I have a podcast episode called How to Hold Space. And you're just going to need to read that because, to your point, Dad, it takes a lot of energy to hold space for people in intense emotion. It's exhausting, and
okay,
it's
so
a skill.
here is a
It can be
point.
exhausting, I should say. Yes.
So your older brother, Stephen, who is a 7, was
Yes.
talking to me over the weekend about a, a person he knows that he's been close to, friends with. And that person has been in grief. We look now back 5 years. They,
Mm.
you know, and he said to me, Mom, I just don't know how to talk to her. Like,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
he, it's like the whole thing is just like, I can't, like he's a 7, he's a 30-second suffering guy, like suffer and get on with it, move on.
Yeah.
So for this person to literally be in her grief now for what looks like to her friends in whatever 5 years is like, okay, I just don't even know how to go there. And I think
Yeah.
for this person, every time she gets maybe a little horizon or a little window, something happens and she just goes right back in, just jumps right
Yeah.
back in the deep end. And now it's like almost like that grief has become her. It, she's taken it on
Personality.
as her identity.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Mm.
just interesting. So um,
So
no,
I'm going to make this episode about my brother, but when Jared and I lost our first kid, and my older brother had us out there, and I remember being kind of nervous because it was a very emotional time, and I don't know him as being an emotional person in that way, and I was a little bit like, well, how's this going to go? And of course, he's a great host, and it was lovely, but my experience of him in that was there was holding space, and there was also a little bit of curiosity on his regard of like, what's it like to feel like this is a thing, you lost your kid, there's a deep emotion, like what's it like? So just to his credit specifically, but then to everybody's credit, is even if it's not in your nature to hold space, you totally can. What I mean?
right.
Like he held space, and it's not in his nature to feel what we were feeling, but he was present for it. So I think for somebody that's been in grief for 5 years, of course, it's hard to know what to do, but it is a skill that can be learned. I
Yeah.
think so. Kudos to Stephen on that. Um, and then I'm going to say, just because this is my podcast and I think it's curious to think about each of the numbers psychically and like what their spiritual gifts are. And for me, I don't know about for all psychics, but for me, connecting with the unseen is a feeling. It's I connect to the energy, and then I sense or I feel the energy. And so on the one hand, our emotions are our connection, their connection to our body and their connection to spirit. On the other hand, if we're too emotional, we can't connect. So I'd be really curious if you're a 4 out there and you're listening, I'd be really curious to learn about their experience of connecting with spirit, and if they're able to do that, and if so, how. It's because literally in mediumship readings, it goes great until if I get too stressed that maybe it's not going well, or if I get too happy that I'm like, oh yeah, like this is going great, then the connection kind of severs it. You have to kind of observe your emotions rather than fall into them
Mm.
in order to have that connection. So, yeah, if anyone's a 4 out there and wants to talk to me about psychic stuff, I'd love to have that conversation. Um, but back to our Enneagram discussion. So their vices are envy, they're overcome by emotion. I'm thinking of like the tortured artist. Um, Anything else we want to say about what do they value? They value authenticity, and um, anything else we want to say about the 4 before we move on to wings, I guess is what I'm saying.
Things that have
Um,
meaning and depth are important. Beauty and aesthetics are inspired. If you happen to find yourself in the Louvre in Paris, France, someone that's standing at a painting and just mesmerized, meditating on it, that's likely to be a 4 because they get it. They get the difficulty, the layers of the paint that the artist had to paint, the message. I mean, they really really get it. I mean, I walk on by and I see people. I go, "What in the world are they?" They get it, and they
yeah.
also when you're in a 4 and you're in a concert, there's lots of layers of music that are stacked upon each other to create this beautiful music, and they get the layers.
Mm.
They get it right away, and and they find inspiration from it. So I like to put that in there. I mean, the 4s make this world a much more beautiful for all the rest of
I want to find out about Lin Manuel Miranda, or if he's a
Yeah.
4.
The other thing I'd just say, before we move on, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, so the downsides of 4, as your dad was saying, is that they can, not only if they have an emotional burst, but also just because they're constantly that thinking that something's always missing. So in relationships, they can be very needy. They can be very like, oh,
Mm.
are you leaving me today? Is this the day? Whatever. So that whole
Oh.
tendency to sort of have that push pull in relationships, like they want to pull people closer, but then they're so worried that they're not, that this is not perfect and this is not whatever authentic, that then they push people away. So it's that. So Suzanne Stabile, we were in a class with her, and there was two people sitting in the front. There were two fours, and she basically said, "How's that relationship? Good luck with that," because like
Yeah.
it'll be too hard. That's gonna be hard on you guys. But also, a growth area for fours is learning to appreciate what they have or appreciate what's true in the situation, because they're always looking for what's missing. They're,
Mm.
if any group has a lack mentality, it's a four, because they always see what's missing.
That's surprising to me. Wow.
Yeah.
God, I just have so much empathy for fours. I mean, I can relate to the emotional stuff,
Yeah.
um, not to the authenticity or the. I mean, I want to be authentic, but not with the sense of style. Um, but that looking for what's missing, it makes sense. Like from a subconscious point of view, if you're trying to be unique, then you're always looking for like ways where you can express and So it makes
Yeah.
sense that there's sort of that striving. Oh, bless their hearts.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you won't find them in, they're always going to be looking for those things that have meaning, that have depth. So, like an afternoon game of kickball is not really, like a thing you're going to find a four interested in, because that's
yeah.
not going to, that's whatever. So where they can really be unique, have something that's meaningful. Now, you get fours in a meaningful conversation, oh, they're in,
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of it will be self-referenced. It's going to be a lot about I and me and how I see the world and what I think is missing in the world. But they're going to go there. They're going to love that, So
Mm. I mean, we'll get to relationships later, but I'm just thinking about a friend of mine that is not a four, but manages a bunch of fours. And
yes,
so I was thinking about like performance reviews and
yes.
how if you just had a quantitative review, of like, oh, you're an 8 out of 10, or if you just had that, how awful that would be for a four.
Oh yeah,
you know,
terrible.
you'd have to have quality feedback that points to their uniqueness, and probably honors whatever emotional experience they're having at the time, which if you don't know how to hold space and you don't know how to empathize would be really hard to do.
And what is it? Do you know what this person is that's managing the force?
They're a 9.
Oh.
Well, so here's the thing with those fours,
Oh.
depending upon what kind of work it is, they're going to bring creativity. So if it's a
Mm-hmm.
creative endeavor, they're probably really fabulous at the work. But man, trying to manage a bunch of them, that would be challenging, because they're going to try to out authentic each other. Does that make sense? Like,
There's
oh, I'm the
that. And
unique one.
then,
Oh, I'm the peacock
yes.
today.
Well, then my
So
friend that's the 9 wants everybody, wants it to be peaceful,
sure.
wants peace and everybody to be happy. Well, a 4's not going to be happy. They're going to have an intense emotion. And so that like instinct of a 9 is to try to fix it. And you can't,
Right. No.
so
And they
for
don't really want it
her,
fixed. That's the
and they
other thing.
don't, right. So for her, it's
So,
like she has to reset herself around that. But even in the holding space aspect, for one manager to have a lot of 4s, that's a lot of space holding to do,
it
you know.
is. It is.
So, oh gosh, life is so interesting. I just love this.
Yeah.
Uh, um. Okay, so are we ready to move on to wings?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we identified earlier the 4's wings are the 3 and the 5, and we know that we just did the 3 recently. So the 3's the competitive achiever, they're a doer, but we don't know that much about the 5. So maybe let's start there. What's the 5 wing like? And how does that serve the 4?
Well, the 5s are the deep thinkers.
Well, they can set clear boundaries for. They can say, okay, so they can go into thought. So what is it I'm trying to accomplish? And I think it's kind of a 5-3 thing together. Let's put some boundaries around this project. When is it going to be good enough? When can I call it? When can I move on to something else? Not only in the outer when you're creating something, but also in the inner. When can I stop ruminating about this? The project's done, or can I set it aside for? So the 5 can intellectually help uh, the 4 not be stuck in, an emotional time. Help them move on.
Because think about
Hopefully, it can.
5s are called quiet specialists, and they're thinkers, so they by natural can be more objective. So sometimes leaning into the 5 can help the 4 move out of that very subjective feeling space into a more objective thinking space.
One of the things that you guys I've heard you say about the 5s is that they have a very limited amount of energy.
Yes.
And so de facto, a 5's not going to want to be too unique, because then they'd have to spend their energy, A, cultivating that, and then B, responding to whatever reaction people have to their uniqueness. So I think a 5 has to be so strategic with their energy that just that concept alone might help a 4. Of like, how much energy do I really have to expel on these emotions? And if I spend that much energy on it, then what's left for doing the job, taking care of the kids, or whatever else is important.
Right.
So what the 5 energy can do, and what the 5 energy can do is kind of link the thinking and the feeling together, so they become less impulsive and restrain the part that's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was going to say that those 4s, they have unlimited energy for feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's unlimited. And like you're saying, the 5 has limited energy, limited. So that whole creating that balance from an energetic sort of standpoint can be helpful.
This is so funny, but it's just dropping into mind how funny it is that as a 2, I made a podcast about how to hold space. I'm like, that would be a 2 thing to do. Of course, that's something I can teach. That's just so funny, because I was thinking about like how to be with a 4. And yeah. Okay. Sorry, I took us off track.
That's
So 5s, the quiet specialist, they're discerning. They're going to help reel in the 4. Where do we go with 3s?
Okay, so a 3, they're about being effective and getting things done. So the 3 and the 5 together, and the 3, okay, this is going to be good enough, and help them also be aware of how others might perceive them. So what is it that I need to do to look good and have an effective presentation, get along with others? Help them realize that overplaying my emotions in front of people who aren't used to that is not working for me. That's what the 3 can do. And just be aware of the impact they have on other people.
A 3 would do that?
Yes.
Well, yeah, because they're looking for how to be effective and how to be successful. Okay. So that means you've got to know what impact you're having on others. So 3s are pretty much other focused as opposed to 4s, which are self-focused. So, like figuring out, okay, how do I need to show up? Not for me. How do I need to show up in the context of this group, this, whatever. So learning to sort of balance that for a 4. And then the other thing, of course, that a 3 is going to do for a 4 is move them into action. Mm-hmm. It's like, what are the results I need to accomplish? What's the thing I need to get done?
Yeah. You know, it's so fascinating. Every time we do these, what happens in my mind is I start with whatever number we're talking about and I get that reference. And then we start talking about the wings. And all of a sudden, that number in my mind becomes kind of a powerhouse. So I'm thinking about
Yeah.
this 4, and I'm thinking there's this creative, emotional depth. But then if you can add a little bit of discernment, and like we can take an actor, they're going to take whatever knowledge they have about the scene or about whoever they're working with to help them direct that energy. And then we have that 3 and that achiever that's going to help them, give them the energy to push through and to really figure out how they're affecting others, and to just not feel their feelings for the sake of feeling them, but also to do something with them, and like unlock the potential that emotions have. Like, if you were a 4 that could harness both of those wings, I mean, like, that's pretty
Well,
unstoppable.
that's why you think, to me, it's like that list of actors that Dad read earlier. It's like
Yeah.
along the way, those people have figured out how to take those emotions and move them out and do something with them, you know,
Yeah.
to have that objectivity about how and when to use them, and then also how to get the results. I think there's probably a lot of unsuccessful 4s out there who are striving to be a singer songwriter or who are striving to be an actor or an actress, but
Mm-hmm.
haven't accessed their wings enough to help them channel those emotions into something that gets bought out there in the market.
Yeah. All right, 4. So if you're struggling, just get a coaching session and figure out how to access your wings.
That's right. That's right.
We don't have time to dive deep into that. Yes.
So interesting story. So um, the type 4 that Dad was talking about that he loves to watch from the choir risers uh,
Uh,
is about to go spend an extended period of time with a 3, and she's
okay.
both looking forward to it and nervous about it. And so, in part because she's looking forward to it, she's like, okay, this will be a good opportunity. Like, I'm going to see how this 3 really operates. So that's one thing. And at the same time, she's like, and I'm going to have to go. Like, I'm going to have to withdraw. I know I'm going to have to spend some time away before, because I can't do this all the time. It's going to be too much.
Right.
So she's aware of like, okay, this is going to be really good for me. And whoa, here I go. So,
Yeah. Let me lean into my 5 a little bit and get the heck out of here so I
yeah,
can go feel my feelings, come back when I'm ready.
right.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, that's just beautiful. Every time I'm noticing, now that we're to the 4th episode, I'm noticing my thought patterns. I'm like, every time we get to the wings, all of a sudden that number becomes kind of unstoppable in my mind. It's like
Yeah,
I
all those,
really get how you could be a well-rounded person.
yeah, and have
you
so
know.
much to offer, really. I mean, think about the contribution that Mary Harlan has made to all of us,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, I uh, of the ones that we read earlier, I'm thinking about Alanis Morissette. Um, her her music has evolved so much in her lifetime, and part of I listened to an interview of her not that long ago, and part of the reason it evolved is because she actually learned how to set boundaries, to Dad's point.
Ah,
And once she learned how to set boundaries, it was like she was able to not just feel her feelings, but have discernment about her feelings and why she was feeling them, and do I want to stay stuck in this? Could I feel something else instead? And so dealing with that and recognizing her sensitivity, and um yeah, it's been interesting. I think a lot of people my age maybe grew up with her. She had one of her Jagged Little Pill, her first big album was out when I was middle school or high school. And so we've kind of grown up with her. And now her music, at the time it was maybe bitter or angry, and now it's quite spiritual.
mm-hmm.
And her songs about motherhood will just make you cry in a second. And so it's fascinating. I would love to have a conversation with her about the Enneagram and how she's grown in that respect, because there's no way that she hasn't leaned into that 5. I think she had the 3 early on, but I think she's leaned into that 5 and able to mature in a different way. So, but I digress. Anything else about the 3 and the 5 wing?
Not
All
for
right,
me.
well, let's move to what's the stretch and the release for the 4s. And just remind me every time, stretch is like our growth opportunity. If our wings aren't doing it for us, we move towards our stretch. And the release is where we need to go. You know, when the crab's been out of the shell for too long, we go to the release.
Right, when we need to relax, when we need to recover, when we need to relieve the stress of whatever it is.
Okay.
I think about the stretch is if you're bored, if you don't feel like you've grown, look at your stretch point. So
I
now
don't want
4s, the 4s, their release is the 1, the strict perfectionist, and their stretch is the 2. So 1 being that precision, discipline, composure. I mean, think about those 1s. They got those very strict boundaries. They're very,
and that's
you've
their
got
release?
Yes.
Or their stretch. That's their release.
That's the release. Because think about if they moved into more discipline, if they moved into more composure, they would soften up. It would give them more boundaries, which is really, yeah. This is a quote right from the text. The action center enables you to create some distance between your emotions and yourself.
Okay. And for them, not feeling emotions is a release.
Yeah, exactly. Because they have to get beyond their emotions. So because that's the release. I mean, if you think about it, if you're just swimming in that same, whatever that is, jealousy, fear, anger, grief. I mean, you could just say whatever it is, they tend to swim in that emotion and then not get out of it. So how are you going to get out of it? Well, okay, let's put some distance between me and my emotion. Let's recognize that there's principle here. Remember, 1s are highly principled. They're about doing the right thing. They're about having rigor and discipline. So, yeah.
And for 1s, the 4 is the release or the stretch?
I think it's the stretch because 2 it's the release for 2, remember?
Oh, okay, that's right. Okay, so 1s and 4s just need to be friends.
Yeah.
If you're a 4, you need to get you a 1 that's going to help you settle. And if you're a 1, you need to get a 4 that's going to give you something to move towards, give you a role model. Okay.
Right.
That's beautiful. Like, to me, the idea of a 1 being a release is so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But it does make sense if you're a 4. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And then they need to come over to 2 for their stretch. That's a little bit surprising to me just because we share the emotion of things.
Yeah.
But I guess since 2s are other oriented, that's the reason.
Right. It moves you from internal feeling to external feeling. Remember, we talked about 4s are all self-referenced, 2s are all other referenced. So they can begin to have more compassion. They can be more supportive of other people. It really is moving from self to others. That's the deal.
Yeah. And 2s do take action differently than a 4. I guess 2s and 1s both take action, so that helps them.
Exactly.
Helps a 4.
Well, and if they'll move into that 2, remember we talked about 4s engage in that push-pull thing in relationships. And if they can move into that 2 part, then it begins to sort of minimize that push-pull that they experience in relationships, interpersonal relationships.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
Right.
And the thing about if you're other focused, it's like I don't need to look for what's missing. Like
Right.
that's not a thought that enters my mind because I'm just yeah.
Right.
I have other unhealthy thoughts. It's not like I've reached nirvana,
Right.
but that's not one of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dad, anything to add about ones, twos, stretch and release for fours?
Well, not really. It's just that what they can get an idea how they're impacting others. They go to their two for, and I think that's something that they should learn to do if they're having a difficulty holding on to a friend, a relationship. I was in a conversation with one four, just a lovely woman, very talented, but she says she catches guys, but they release themselves. So I think going to the two
Oh,
could no problem catching. I can catch them all the
yeah.
time. It's it's holding on. So I think that's where if you're experiencing something like that, you can spend some time in the two and try to understand the impact you're having on it. And you
Mm-hmm.
can go to the one. The one tends to be more quiet, more thoughtful. Uh, I mean, I can't imagine. I've got a strong one wing, and I don't enjoy that sometimes. So it's counterintuitive to me to think that you would ever go to a one and ask for help. But if you don't have it, like strong, like it's not a wing for them; it's a line. So they can get a lot of help there. So I think that's all I have to say. I just love Ford. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, and also think about the one can help the fours. The fours don't enjoy like things that you would think of as mundane tasks. That because that's not a creative expression. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things, mundane tasks that we all have to do in our life. Just like you
Yeah.
know those sort of so that one part. That's why it seems counterintuitive. It's like this is going to be stress relieving to do the
Yeah.
dishes, but in truth, it's like moving past that procrastination, moving past um, the the resistance, because four is going to have resistance to things that are what we would think of as mundane or
Right.
pedestrian. So if you move into that one space, like I can just give up the resistance, which then is a stress reliever.
Yeah.
Resistance is
Well,
stress.
I think a one, because of the perfection, it's like they're always trying to hone their craft, whatever their craft is. And
Right.
so if it's a four, it's like you're going to naturally just subconsciously with instinctively, if you're trying to move towards one, it's going to force you to put some purpose behind that emotion other than just feeling them. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling this feeling, but I'm trying to get better at whatever it is I'm doing. And so it's going to connect those dots of how can I use that to hone my craft, so to speak.
Right.
That's fascinating. It's hilarious to me that since Dad and I are 9 and 2 and we both share the one wing, that we're both sort of confused. Like, wait a minute, one can be somebody's release point. How is that? It just beats us up.
Oh yeah, it's tough. It's rough.
And I think that's just yeah. Every time I say this, but I'm just so glad that we're doing this because it just gives such context to the human experience and how we all experience the same thing in such different ways and get different things from it. And for a four to not instinctively know that not everybody feels things that way, like for somebody that's not a four, it's kind of like, duh, you're pretty intense over there, But so then when you learn about the Enneagram and go, oh, other people don't deal with this? Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other people don't have this inner critic? Weird.
Right. Or other
Yeah.
people don't get washed over. I mean, I'll never forget this force says to me, "You mean you don't get taken over by your emotions?" And I was like, "No."
No, you don't.
Not hardly. Not hardly. But I mean, it was just so odd to her that it was like, but
Yeah.
it was great. Mary, y'all remember that Mary and I trained together for a long time. And it was just absolutely great because Mary was so in tune to her emotions, and she was, um, I would say a redeemed four. So she really could move into that two thing, and we could sort of meet around in that two space.
Because it
But
was your wing.
right, but I could really help. I could really feel like I could order the day, and I could be sure that we were moving on task when
Being
she might.
effective.
Right. And she would get overwhelmed thinking that it wasn't going well. I'm not sure this is going well. I don't know. How do you think this is going?
Yeah.
I don't think this is going well. I'm like, Mary, it's going fine. Partly it's because I'm like, we're on time. We're moving through the material. We're getting there. People will do what they do with it. We'll keep, we're going to keep moving on this, and like, just don't worry about it. But she'd be like, I don't know if they're getting it. I don't know. Then I'd be like, it's fine, Mary. It's fine. Let's just keep moving. Keep moving.
Oh my gosh. Bless her. Bless all the fours' hearts. I can so
Yeah.
relate to that.
Yeah. Well, and I could also sort of buoy her up, like, because we were doing a handoff. It'd be like, okay, you're doing this next part, and then I would sort of say, okay, now the next part, da 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 da, like especially if they were like doing something at their table and they were talking, gave us an opportunity to talk. I could kind of tee her up so that some of that emotional stuff, she could bring it, but in a way that would have value to the people in the room.
Yeah. The thing that comes to mind about this, because I'm thinking it's such a beautiful example of being in relationship with a different number. But the thing that you had as a redeemed three is you had the ability to hold space for her emotion, and you had enough energy to not feel like you were victimized by her emotional experience.
Right.
And so even though your numbers might have naturally worked well together anyway, you had to do your own work in order to show up for her and in order to appreciate what she had to give and to see that it had value. Because if you're I just want to be effective and I just want to do it the best, somebody's creativity might not might slow you down, so in order to appreciate her gifts, I just think that's so beautiful and a helpful reminder for us, I think motivator for people, that sometimes we can get lazy about wanting to do our work, so to speak, but often it's because we don't really understand how it's going to serve us.
Right.
So well, so we're talking about relationships, and we've talked about how fours need space holding is the term I gave it. Anything else we should know about being in a relationship with four?
Well, I think you really want to focus on opportunities for them to bring forward that creative energy, and to value and honor that creativity. And then I think the other thing that you could do for a four is, because they're constantly looking at what's missing, is be the place in their life that reminds them of the good things that they have. Like hold that space for them. Like, look at how wonderful your life is. And, oh my gosh, isn't that great? And so
It's so
being
unique.
being that person that reminds them what they do have and what's working for them, and the reassurance too. I mean, Mary knew. It was interesting because, okay, so another friend of ours, a very good friend of ours, is a seven. And so Mary the four and the other person, the seven, would fall out, and they would be like not talking or not, not in the best space. But Mary and I were always fine, because I'm a three. I wasn't going to have the same reaction to her to her deal as the seven did. So I could just be with her, and we know, okay, we're going to be fine no matter what. So
Yeah, that makes sense. The 7 has this big vision. They want to go and do things and be adventurous. They don't have time for all your feelings.
Well, and even this one is who's highly sensitive, but they
Mm-hmm.
would get to a place where they didn't agree, and then they couldn't figure out how to, so they just had to take time apart and come back.
Mm,
But
yeah.
so yeah,
So
so
as a 2, I'm imagining if I'm in a relationship with a 4 and a 4 is feeling all their feelings, it- mm, I'm
you're
wondering
you're
I'm
going to have to
wondering if
be
a 4 is going
careful
to
as
be.
a two. As a two, you
Well,
could be
yes, that's
taken
true.
over. That's
That's
the
true.
thing.
But
You have to hold your own space because remember, twos are other reference, and they're so sensitive to others' feelings, and fours have such
mhm,
big feelings. It's like four could just take a two over, tilt.
yeah. I guess what I'm wondering is this hypothesis, and we might not even know the answer, but I'm thinking a normal emotional reaction for a 4 might look like extreme depression for any other number. You know, like, and so just in terms of how, as a literally, that's where I was going as a 2 is like, I'm going to tend to want to freak out when really they're just being a 4 and they're going to feel it as long as they want to wallow in it and then they won't. Um, and so I'm going to have to not overreact to that. That's my like hypothesis is that what is natural for a 4 might cause me to have a red flag when really it's just them. It's a yellow flag. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think you do have to be sensitive to, um, when are they just being four, and when is it crossed the line into something that we would consider unhealthy and in need of, professional.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, anything else about 4s? Dad, it's been a bit since you said anything. Anything
Well,
we want to add about being in relationship with them or anything in general?
well, here's what a trigger a four. If you're in a relationship with a four, is number one, they don't like to be ignored or slighted. So if you are really trying to be intimate with a four, make sure that you're paying them appropriate enough,
Mm,
and ask them to do something that's contrary to their values. Is that's a broad spectrum about how they think, feel, uh, eat, clothes. I mean, you got to keep some space around the ordinary. And any event that elicits their envy. So if you're with a partner and you come to know them, you're just going to have to try to frame things that's not going to generate some envy, because it may be natural for them to see someone that has a bigger diamond ring, somebody has a
mm,
fancier house, or somebody has a better looking husband. Whatever it is, you're going to have to tell them what you have is great, and you have no idea what they're dealing with inside that big fancy house. You have no
mm-hmm,
idea how that handsome husband's treating her, and you don't know if they're still making payments on that big fancy diamond ring. You got to bring them down to earth and kind of work with them and help them. And maybe sometimes if you're with a four and you're going to a place that you think they're going to have their envy or they're going to recharge, coach them up before they go in there. And then you just go in there and you have a small dose. Don't give them time
mm,
to swim in it. And then also be a master of changing the subject. If they're getting into something and you see a pattern developing that you think is unhealthy or that you don't enjoy, find a way to change the subject. And what other else?
mm,
Uh, they get triggered when they don't receive credit for what they do. So you've got to remind them of the quality of their work and the value they bring to the relationship. And anytime they feel like they're not good enough, tell them, you're more than enough. Remind them of the things that they have done that have served them. And also, I just think you have to kind of help them continue on their journey to go from the low side to the high. They're just, what J.K. Rowling has done for us, all these fabulous
mm-hmm.
fours. Benedict Cumberbatch, not Patch, some of the roles he's played in these movies, they're very different from one and the other. See that a guy that has that kind of talent, that that he's gone to his wings and his lines to help deliver something really different. So just things like that. Just know that if you're going to be in a relationship with your four, it's your job to nurture them and help them and help them to not be stuck. And also, if you're going to commit to a four relationship, you got to learn not to take things personal. That, as your mother has said before, sometimes it's not them; it's just that subtype that they're acting out that's got control of them. Not who they really are and how they really feel. They're just probably having an emotional display that appears extreme to you, but they don't get it that it's extreme to anybody. They just feel like in that moment, this is what I'm feeling, and they don't are unaware of the impact. So I guess I've said a lot there. That's how I would be with
it. As you were talking, I think some things were adding up for me, which was the uniqueness, and then the extreme emotion. And it's occurring to me, and no offense to fours, but I'm assuming a four has a pretty fragile ego. Would that be accurate?
We're generalizing on these short podcasts across all types of different people. Everybody's fourness is different. Like the one lady I said, I didn't think she was a four until she sat down with the table where the fours were. She doesn't identify with a lot of things I just said. So I'm talking about people who are really coming from the baby four you talked about. They're just now becoming aware that they can enjoy themselves if they work on being a little bit different. So that's where I want to go. It's hard for me to stereotype this big category of creative people who have had different experiences.
Yeah, the billions of people on Earth, we're going to put you in 9 categories.
That's right. They're in these little boxes. You know.
You're just right there. Yeah. Mom, did you want to add anything?
No, just that, their fear is that they won't have significance, and that they have to be true to themselves and they have to make a difference. So those are the things that are important to them. So it's like, how do you frame that?
Yeah, they want to have a really meaningful life is my
absolutely
takeaway from that. Yeah.
So we think about supportive feedback. Supportive feedback is very important to a 4. And you can think about what are the elements that they need to hear. Well, they need to hear how what they did made a contribution, how it made a difference, and what creativity they brought to it that was valuable to you, because that's going to give them what they need in terms of.
Right. I love that. Thank you for bringing it back to the feedback, because I love to get to that kind of detail about what does some, I think we all want to compliment and give each other feedback, but we don't necessarily have to do it well. So, perfect. Well, I think I'm ready to wrap up. Are you guys ready to wrap up?
Sure.
I think so.
All right. So I'm going to take us out on some sort of I'm going to say one more thing because it doesn't quite go into the blessing, but I was just thinking about, and Dad, you already said it, that the 4s that you listed are some of the most idolized people in our country world, And so the irony that a lot of 4s have trouble hanging on to relationship, when the 4s that we see on the public stage are so revered. And so I think that just points to how do we support them to take on the other skills and to go to their release when they need to. And I just think that's so fascinating that could be a struggle, So, all right, 4s, we love you, we honor you, and we don't really know you because all of you are so different, which we think is great. And we look forward to visibly seeing you because we know you're going to look fantastic. And feel your feelings. Don't wallow, please. And we'll talk to you all soon. Guys, come back for Enneagram 5. Bye, loves.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Living Out Love podcast. If this episode was helpful for you, there are 3 ways that you can share the love. You can send this episode to family, friend, neighbor, leave me a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, or comment and ask questions on YouTube. This season is meant to be interactive. Thanks again for your presence. I appreciate you being here. Talk to you next week, loves.